I think that often as parents, we think like, well, I just need to work on my own stuff. And if I'm stressed, it's because there's something wrong with me and I'm not doing a good enough job. And if I just figure my stuff out, then everything's going to, be unicorns and rainbows. And I want to say that if you're if there's some really big, tough things happening with your child, it makes sense that that's hard. Like even the person who has done all kinds of work on their own stuff, it's still going to be stressful, right? If your child is having a 2-hour aggressive meltdown every single day, then it makes sense that you're struggling, right? It's not just about your stuff. It's also about understanding what's happening for your child. And that I think is important, not just for your own sanity, but also your child deserves that, right? You're not going to, address everything by looking inward at yourself. You also need to do the work of understanding your child. So they go.
Welcome to Single Parent Success Stories, a podcast designed to inspire single parents. Here you'll find resources from self-care to finances to parenting and everything in between. Discover what it takes to thrive. Let the stories inspire you to what is possible. Before we start the next conversation, I want to invite you to check out my amazing book, The Gift Inside, a powerful guide for healing your body, mind, and soul. Reclaim your strengths and awaken your true potential. Whether you are navigating heartbreak or simply seeking deeper fulfillment, this book offers the tools to turn your struggles into triumphs. It is time to unlock the gift within you. Available now on Amazon, or you can check it out on my website www.irinashehovtsov.com. Welcome to Single Parent Success Stories. Today we have a special guest, Dr. Gila Reckess. She is a 𝐭𝐲 certified parent coach and certified clinic coach, in addition to being a clinical psychologist and neuropsychologist. Most importantly, she is a single mom. Dr. Gila specializes in single parenting with connection, not perfection. She is passionate about helping single parents build healthy relationships with their kids and themselves through workshops, individual coaching, and her group program, the Single Parentology Lab. Her motto is, even if you're on your own, you don't have to do it alone. So welcome, Dr. Gila. It is a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for having me and for the work that you're doing with this podcast. I think, us single parents, it often feels like we're the only ones out here. And so having these stories out there, I think is so powerful.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And I couldn't have done it with my wonderful guests who come and share all this wealth of knowledge and experiences from all walks of life. It's been totally an amazing experience. We're in our 5th year. So it's been an incredible journey.
Nice.
So please share with us, how did you become a single parent?
How did I become a single? So that's a bit of a long story, but I came to parenthood in a slightly non-traditional route. So it's kind of a long story that I don't necessarily want to go into, but I will say when my son was almost 4, so his dad and I, we were partnered, we were not married, and his dad and I separated, and his dad moved across the country. So he's in Florida and we are in New York State. And so I became not only a single parent, but basically a solo parent. So I have full physical custody. And it's been an adventure, to say the least.
Yeah, totally. What are some of the struggles or challenges you faced during your single parenting?
Yeah, so I am not only a single parent, but a single parent of what I call a beautifully complex kiddo, a kid who I think it would be accurate to describe him as strong-willed, neurospicy, right? So he's a kid who knows what he wants and isn't afraid to express it. And he has some big, and in the past especially, some really big and challenging for me behaviors. And I think especially as we were adjusting to the new sort of reality, but really, I would say at different points along the journey that had different stressors, like COVID was a big one, right? Power struggles have been a really big one because, again, I have a kid who knows what he wants and knows how to express it, which I have come to really appreciate as one of his beautiful strengths. It's not always easy, but it's something that I love about him and that I want to foster and encourage. And that's been one of like the big, I don't want to say like big shift because I don't know that I like ever thought of it as like this horrible thing about him, but a shift for me has been really being able to lean into that and really remind myself and embrace it as something beautiful about him. And so, but power struggles, I would say, big meltdowns has been something I've struggled with. And then that's on the child piece. And then the personal piece, right, is something that I think all single parents struggle with to some extent. Is this is not what I envisioned for myself, right? This is not the life I pictured when I was sort of daydreaming at age 12 of what life would look like. And there is an adjustment to that, right? There is this sort of radical acceptance process, a grieving process. And I think that it never fully goes away. I like to say we get these little like zingers. So even if you're at a place where you're at peace with your situation, there may be a situation like I remember there was a party I went to like a year or so ago, and there was something about like being at this family's house that it was just like they had the life that I envisioned for myself, like they had the house and the family and and it was just one of those like zinger moments, those little landmines of like, ooh, there it is, right? And so that's definitely something that is challenging and it's lonely at times, right? Like it can feel, there's emotional things that are hard about it. And then logistically, it's really challenging. I mean, one of the reasons why I shifted what I'm doing work-wise is because it's really hard to have, I was working in an outpatient clinic and, when school is closed, when COVID hits, when your kid is sick, like you can't, I didn't have a backup. And so having to find creative ways to make things work is, I think, a hallmark of single parenthood and certainly has been a hallmark of my journey.
Yeah, totally, totally. Wow. And yeah, incredible, the strength and agility you had to have to overcome that and,
Mm.
be able to do what you do. How has your work shifted since becoming a single parent?
Yeah. So I initially was working again as a neuropsychologist. So I was working in an outpatient clinic. And when I went through my own sort of parenting, what would it be like growth process, which is an ever all, work in progress always. I'm still on the ride. I'm still a work in progress for sure. But I really, my son hit like some pretty big bumps in the road, and I hit some big bumps as a parent in handling it. And so I really took a deep dive into trying to figure out how to support him and how to do it in a way that was aligned with my values, which of course meant figuring out what those values were, and figuring out how I wanted to approach parenting and how I could do it in a way that really met the child who was in front of me, not the hypothetical child, right? This whole like, love the one you've got, right? Get to know the one you've got and figure out what they need and how to do that. And so I really took a deep dive into that because there were some really hard things going on that that I needed to address. And so in that process, I became really passionate about connection-based parenting and about this idea of really meeting our kids where they are, figuring out what your child needs in their beautiful uniqueness. And I became really passionate about supporting other parents along the way. And increasingly, I've become more and more focused on supporting single parents. I do also work with partnered parents, but and of course, a lot of partnered parents come to me and they say, I'm married, but I feel like a single parent. I'm basically functioning as a single parent, right? This is something I hear all the time. But I'm increasingly passionate about creating supportive spaces that really are specifically tailored for single parents, because I just see how much out there is not. And, there's beautiful resources out there about parenting, which I'm so grateful for. I have, benefited from them. I know so many people benefit from them. And in even the most supportive, parenting spaces, I find there can be those little landmines, those little zingers, those little reminders that your family looks different, that your support network is different. And there are challenges to that. And there are also blessings. And I like to talk about that also, because it's not all doom and gloom. And I think it's easy to focus on the doom and gloom. And it is challenging, don't get me wrong. But I think there all also are some blessings to being a single parent. So that's what I'm doing now, is trying to create support and supportive spaces for single parents.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for doing what you do.
Thanks.
Common challenge where people seek your help.
Yeah, I think that there's so I think that each family has like three pieces that we are always working on, and that it's helpful to always work on. And people come to me, usually their main complaint falls into one of these three categories. And what I've learned is that no matter which one it falls into, it helps, and we need to address all three. And so the first one is the parent piece. So this is the parent who says, I just keep losing it. I keep snapping. I keep yelling. I keep dedicating myself to quote unquote doing better. I'm reading the books, listening to the podcasts, but I just can't do it. I can't handle it. I'm feeling overwhelmed. They feel like they're a bad parent. They're doing something wrong. So that's the parent piece. And then the second is the child piece, right? My kid is totally out of control. They're having explosive meltdowns. I just don't know how to handle it. I don't know how to help them. I'm worried there's something terribly wrong with them. What do I do? I'm at my wit's end. And then the third piece is the relationship piece, right? Like, I'm just really struggling to find joy in parenting this child, right? Like, there's something that is like, it just feels like it's missing. Everything is constantly tense in our house and in our relationship. It's all power struggles all the time. We just need different things, and I don't know how to make that work. And so the parent piece, the child piece, and the relationship piece, I think all of those three are so important, and they all interrelate. So the better able we are to understand what's going on for our children, and to really bring that compassionate lens in understanding what's going on for them, the better we can stay grounded in our own regulation, because we're not thinking like, I have this bratty child who's disrespectful and defiant and like naughty and all these terrible things. We're thinking, I have this child in front of me who is really struggling, and I am here to support them. And that is such a different place to be, right? And then conversely, if we are able to stay grounded in our own stuff, and we are able to recognize, I'm really upset right now because I learned that anger is not safe, and I haven't figured out how to receive anger or express anger. And this isn't about my kid right now. This is about what's coming up for me, right? So that would be one example. Then we can better able show up for our kids. So I actually like to think of these three pieces as a tree, and the roots is the parent piece, because when we are sort of like strongly grounded, rooted into the ground, then when the winds blow, when there's a storm, which there will be a storm, when the storm blows, we are not going to topple over. Our family unit, our own mental health is not going to topple over. And then the trunk is that child piece. It's really being empowered, right? This like strengthened, empowered, confident piece of understanding your child and what's happening for them and what they need. And then the branches and the leaves, that's the connection piece, the relationship piece. And the individual leaves, like the individual tool that works one day, but maybe doesn't work another, right? Individual leaves might work in one season and not the next. So, pretending there's an angry lion in your child's mouth when you brush their teeth, that might work for a week. And then that leaf is, falling off the tree. It's no longer working, no longer needed. But the general concept is that branch. And so that would be, the connection piece, the playfulness piece, the communication piece. How do we connect with our kids? So
I love that. And I love the analogy you made of a tree. I think it's so relatable with the trunk, leaves, and branches. But would you say that all starts with parent and kind of fulfilling their own needs first, so they come in resourceful and then they're able to better deal with any kind of triggers or any things the child does?
Yeah.
Kind of first we have to ground ourselves so that then we can give better care and support and see that trigger or see that event from a place of love, from a place of support, as opposed to immediate reaction and reactivity to get that.
Yeah, I would say two things. So one is that the parent piece is absolutely important. Again, if you don't have those roots, that those grounded roots, then that tree is going to come toppling down, right? So we do really need to focus on that. And it is always helpful, I think, to if you can, to be able to pause in those tough moments and ground yourself into your own roots, as it were. Having said that, I also think it's important to recognize, I think that often as parents, we think I just need to work on my own stuff. And if I'm stressed, it's because there's something wrong with me and I'm not doing a good enough job. And if I just figure my stuff out, then everything's going to, be unicorns and rainbows. And I want to say that, if you're if there's some really big, tough things happening with your child, it makes sense that that's hard. Even the person who has done all kinds of work on their own stuff, it's still going to be stressful, right? If your child is having a 2-hour aggressive meltdown every single day, then it makes sense that you're struggling, right? It's not just about your stuff. It's also about understanding what's happening for your child. And that, I think, is important, not just for your own sanity, but also your child deserves that, right? You're not going to, address everything by looking inward at yourself. You also need to do the work of understanding your child. So they go hand in hand. And when you think of a tree growing, it doesn't grow all the roots and finish that, check mark, and now we can grow the tree, finish that, check mark, and now we can grow the branches. They all grow together, right? And they feed each other and they inform each other and they communicate each other. It's a system. And the same is true, I think, for the family system, the parent-child system.
So true. Yeah, totally agree with you. Thank you. Thank you. So how would you address a child who doesn't want to brush their teeth every day?
Who doesn't want to brush?
I know you mentioned, the angry lion.
Yeah. Brushing teeth, it's such a hot one, right? Because part of the trouble, I'm a big believer in, if there's a natural consequence that, that can help you, so brushing teeth is tough because the natural consequence is too long-term for kids to be able to appreciate, right? They don't get that. And so brushing teeth is one of those places where we do have to have a little bit more of the hierarchical dynamic than we do in other places. It's not an easy answer because I think it differs based on a lot of things, based on how old your child is, their developmental capacity, not just their biological age, but their developmental capacity. And also, what is it that's hard about brushing teeth for them? So I think that, one of the first things that I have clients do is to start recording. I have a tracking log where when there is a challenging episode, we want to sort of have a look at that and say, let's zoom out, because often in that moment, you're just focused on, well, they just refuse to brush their teeth. And that's what you're hyper focused on. And when we zoom out, we might see, oh, well, Actually, they are really not being treated in the way that they need to at school. They're spending their whole day feeling miserable. They come home, they're really losing it. They're not sleeping enough at night. They have sensory needs that aren't being met, right? So there's all these different things coming into play that if we just focused on the toothbrushing, we wouldn't see that whole picture. So it's helpful to, and I have a framework that I use that's called the spies. So we, become detectives and figure out like which of the spies, it's an acronym, is contributing. And then the other piece is to get creative around problem solving. If your child is developmentally capable of having proactive conversations, I am a huge believer in using the resource in front of you, which is your child, right? Your child can help you understand what is hard about this, sometimes, not always, and help you come up with creative solutions. So, what the answer is depends on what the problem is, right? And sometimes we think the problem is one thing, but again, when we take a more sort of holistic, big picture look, we realize that actually there's a bunch of other things contributing.
You're right. Just like you said, everything is a system.
Yeah.
You can't be hyper focused on one little thing. You gotta zoom out and have a bigger view of what is happening.
Yeah. So one of the visual models that I use in my own family and with my clients is a sink. So I say we each have this metaphorical sink inside of us. And when the sink is really full, just a few more drops of water make the sink overflow. And that overflow is the dysregulation, right? When maybe they're kicking and screaming, refusing to do anything, or when you as the parent, because we have sinks too, when you as the parent are screaming and snapping and doing things that you don't want to be doing. So when the sink is emptier, the exact same drops of water that made it overflow in that first scenario are going to be totally fine. And in fact, you can handle even more water, right? And the thing is that in life, there's always water coming in. And so part of the goal is to learn, how do I keep my sink? How do I recognize when my sink levels are starting to get high? And how do I keep them lower? What do I do to maintain that sink? And so in the toothbrushing example, it may be that brushing teeth is that final drop of water, but actually there's a whole bunch of other stuff that filled their sink before you even got to the bathroom and told them it was time to brush teeth. Right. And so if we only look at the brushing teeth, then we're missing all the other stuff.
Totally makes sense. It's like the straw that broke the camel's back.
Right. Exactly.
That's what the toothbrushing is doing maybe in the end of the day.
Exactly.
Without unpacking what happened. And it's so much about connection and, seeing, I guess, the bigger picture, what is happening.
Yes.
So what would you say, Heiko, parenting without punishment? What is a better way?
Yeah.
I believe as parents we are examples, and kids follow us, not what we say, what we actually do.
Mm-hmm.
So how would how can you implement this parenting without punishment?
Yeah, I know it sounds so hard, right? A lot of parents, they want to parent without punishment, but there's a lot of fear that comes up, right? Like, if I don't have punishment, what do I have? And that comes from this place of fear of not being in control, right? And we live in a control-based society, and it makes sense that this is a fear that comes up, right? Because this is usually how most of us were raised. And because there's all this messaging about how parents should have their kids under control, quote unquote, right? And so I want to validate that if it feels scary, it makes sense. You're not alone. And there's a reason why it feels scary. And I also want to say, if you think about how it feels to be treated in that way by someone else, whether it's your boss at work or your ex maybe, or your parents when you were a child, when you are treated as something to be controlled, it usually does not lead to wanting to cooperate, right? And it doesn't lead to true respect. There's a lot, respect is like this hot button word, right? I think that actually respectful parenting is the best description of what I do. But I don't use that term because when people hear respect, they think obedience, deference, compliance. And that is not what I mean. True respect comes from seeing and thinking and treating the other person as if their experience and their voice and their perspective are valid and worthy. And when we think of it that way, of course, we want our children to treat us that way. And of course, we want them to feel that we are respecting them. And so that shift, I think that mindset shift of really seeing your child as a human who deserves respect, whose voice and perspective matter, that is a big shift for a lot of people. Right. And so it's a big, complicated question. How do we do this? How do we parent with connection? There's whole courses and programs on that. But I think that mindset shift and the other big shift of seeing your child as having a hard time, not giving you a hard time, is a huge piece of it, right? When we see our children as struggling, we can show up with compassion to support them instead of when we see them as misbehaving and manipulating and all of these other, right, negative sort of judgmental places. Then we want to control them because we want to make it stop. We want to make them behave differently. But when we shift that to see, oh, this is my sweet, beautiful child is having a hard time, right? And they need and deserve my support in working through that struggle. It makes all the difference.
I totally agree with you. And I don't know, maybe I am too soft of a parent. When I was growing up, I had that hard kind of, always being afraid that you will be punished if you do something wrong or if you don't comply in that sense of control. So for me, I like to have more of a conversation with kids. And sometimes some people may say, oh, you're not supposed to be your kid's friend or their parent. You kind of taking care of them and you're directing them, showing, I guess, a better way. But for myself personally, I feel like, I guess it's from my own experience, that I would have to have more explanation why certain things would have to be done this way as opposed to that way, without a simple direct order or like, this is how things are done. It's my way or the highway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Having that kind of relationship with kids as opposed to the other one. And I'm not saying one good or bad, it's just how we relate to one another. And when we're able to explain, when we're able to connect, I think relationship improves in the long run.
Yeah. Communication is such a huge piece of it. And I think our kids are capable of more than we think they are when it comes to communication.
Yeah. Speaking of kids, what do you think is the most important trait to instill in a child?
Wow. There's so many. I think the one that comes to mind.
What would you want to have?
Yeah, there's so many possibilities that come to. There's so many that I want. I think one big one that comes to mind for me is compassion, and compassion for other people and also for yourself. And again, respect also comes into that, right? Compassion and respect. Emotional intelligence, self-regulation, communication skills, all of these things, confidence, so many things. But I think ultimately being able to view the world through a lens of compassion really sort of unlocks so many other things.
Yeah, you're right. I love it. Thank you. Thank you. On your journey, is there any book or resource that helped you on your journey and you would recommend it to others, other single parents?
Yeah, so many. Again, there's just so many amazing resources out there. When I was going through like my particularly tough period, one of the resources that was helpful for me is Hand in Hand Parenting. So it's an organization. There's a book, there's courses, there's, a Facebook group. I also am a big fan of Ross Greene's work. If you have a child who has these big explosive episodes, he has a book called The Explosive Child. Even if you don't have a child that has big explosive episodes, I think a lot of the concepts in his book were really transformative for me and for a lot of my clients. I think there's some really great ideas in there. So those are the two that I would say, but there's so many.
Thank you. Yeah, that was important. I never heard of that hand-in-hand parenting. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
We'll include it in the episode notes, definitely.
And I think with each of them, like there's things that you're going to take from it. There's little like golden nuggets that are going to work for you and resonate for you. And then there's pieces that aren't going to feel aligned or, aren't going to work for you. And so honestly, that's part of the beauty of working with a coach, is that you can really kind of figure out together like what, a more tailored, personalized approach, taking pieces from all those different perspectives and models and frameworks and all of that. But at the end of the day, it's about really attuning to yourself, to your child, and building that relationship.
Yeah, and sometimes books must be reread because we change all the time, and we get a nag next time we to look at the same information. So the light bulb can go on, and we can get more stuff out of it. So thank you. Yay, I love it. Any fun projects you're working on that you like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I just finished hosting a summit for single parents, which was awesome. And I'm hoping to do it again next year. So stay tuned. I do have, the Facebook group that was for that summit, I think I'm going to keep around. And I've really been feeling called to, I've heard over and over again from people in the summit and from other folks in my audience that just having a community, a space where there's other single parents who get it, is so powerful and so valuable. So I have a Facebook group and my group program, and of course, private coaching. So lots of fun stuff going on. And I have a couple workshops in the works.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. Is there anything I haven't asked that you like to share?
So my tagline is single parenting with connection, not perfection. And I pretty much don't do any interview without mentioning the perfection piece, because I think it's so important and we can't hear it enough, which is that you are not expected to be perfect. You are not going to be perfect. And there's two pieces to that. One is that it's not realistic. So I don't even know what perfection means in parenting, but even if there was some achievable perfection state, it's just not realistic given the world we live in. And then two is that it's actually not desirable to be perfect, because if you are perfect, again, whatever that means, then you are not modeling for your child that being human is an act of imperfection, and that we are constantly growing and we are constantly learning. And you don't have opportunities to model for them what happens when you aren't perfect, right? Like, how do you grow from that? How do you repair? How do you reconnect? And so I just want parents to know, if you're not perfect, it's a-okay. You're doing a beautiful job, and to invite you to have grace and compassion for yourself as much as you're trying to do for your children.
I love that. Yeah, it's totally. And sometimes we can get stuck in that perfectionism, but we got to let go because we are human after all. And again, so important how we set our own kids. Like when something not ideal, how do you get out from that challenge? Or something happens, like what do you do?
Yeah, exactly.
So thank you.
Modeling is so powerful. Modeling is like, I call modeling our superpower, right? Whether you want it or not, you're modeling.
Yeah. And it's even more so, like you could be saying one thing, but if you're modeling something else, they're gonna take what you're modeling, and whatever you said went right over the head.
Yep. Do as I say, not as I do does not work.
Awesome. Thank you so much. If people would like to connect and learn more about you, where would they go?
Yeah, so the best way is to get on my email list. I have a few free resources that you can download, and that gets you on my email list, or you can just get on my email list at drgilaparenting.com. I have a short meditation for single parents. I have a guide on understanding tantrums and meltdowns, and that tells you about my SPIES, the SPIES framework that I mentioned. So that's all in the guide, all for free. And so you can get some free stuff and hop on my email list, and then you'll hear about everything going on. And I email once a week with tips and validation and, of course, opportunities to go further.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for the work you are doing for single parents and the whole part of the relationship, this connection with children as opposed to controlling them, but having more of a conversation, having more of a relationship that is needed. And I love your mantra, even though you are alone does not mean you don't have to be alone. So thank you so much for the work you are doing.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you.